Alrighty. Hello, Chris, Dr. Christopher. Are you with CPE?
How's it going?
Good. Yeah, you came over. You're new, right? From BCTC?
I am. It's good to see you. How have you been?
Good.
I
I heard you were here, and then I was very excited. So yeah, we'll have to cross paths.
I am too. It's been I've been on board for about 6 or 7 weeks, I think. Just really excited, doing a lot of good research, and just a great team all around. So yeah, I look forward to seeing you though.
Yeah. So Katie jumped in. Hey, Katie.
Hello, good afternoon.
How are you hanging in there?
Hanging in there.
Katie is one I would ask if there's a committee she's not a part of, because she is.
I'm sure there's one or two. Sometimes I get asked and I try to just say, oh, I think you mean the other Adam chick, since we both work at the institution, but it's most of the time me. He only gets on a few lucky things. You sure you don't want the other one?
It's an honor, right? It's an honor to be invited. Well, Robert, do we want to go ahead and get started? I think this is like a really important day. So there's a lot that we really want to get through and have plenty of time to discuss. So should we kick it off?
I say go ahead.
Okay. Oh, there's Maria. Okay, well, I'm going to share screen here. Okay, folks. Let me just adjust a little bit. Oh. Okay, so this is our, I don't know, however many meetings in. We've made amazing progress and we've got a lot to do today, but I always love kicking it off with a quick little poll. So if you don't mind, grab your phones and go to the menti.com, add our code. And what's your favorite holiday movie? For 751-8823. Okay. Did the code work for you all? No, it didn't work for me either.
Yeah.
Uh-oh. That's weird. That's never happened before. That's not good. Okay, let me see what is going on here. Okay, there we go. I think I needed to refresh. Okay, I'll share again. Okay. Can y'all see my screen?
Yep.
Okay. Try 7175-8006. Okay. Oh, and it doesn't have to just be one word. It can be your movie title. Oh, Elf. Oh, Love Actually. Gremlins. Ooh, put Gremlins in there. I'm gonna have to watch out for you. Die Hard. Okay, okay. We're rebelling a little bit. It's fine. The Holiday. Any Chevy Chase fan? Oh, that's Christmas Vacation. There it is. A Christmas Story. Perfect. Okay, well, I don't know about you, but I'm all about the Hallmark holiday romances. So I am getting my fill for sure. Starts early in my house. Okay, well, let's keep going. And just a quick overview of the agenda today. It might be good to do introductions actually, because we have a few guests and a few people that are newer to the committee. So we will do introductions. We're going to have Travis Muncy with CPE provide a quick data presentation for us that's kind of relevant to our topic and our work. And then we'll dive into the near final draft recommendation statements that we worked on in our last meeting, as well as discuss kind of some of the top action steps that we're considering as a group connected to each of these recommendations. Okay, so why don't we just go ahead? I'll stop sharing screen while we do introductions, and then that'll be a perfect transition. Travis, after that, you can just go ahead and share screen for the data presentation.
Perfect.
And hello, everybody. If I haven't met you, I'm Lily Massa-McKinley, and I'm the Executive Director of the Kentucky Student Success Collaborative, which is an initiative of CPE. And I'm happy to co-chair this work group here with my colleague, Robert. Robert, I'll pass to you.
Hey, I am Robert Hayes. I am the Executive Director of Student Community Resources and Services at the University of Kentucky. On my screen, it looks like Tony is next.
Hello, I am Tony Bartley. I am a post-secondary transition coordinator for Gear Up Kentucky, and I serve students at Eastern Kentucky University and BCTC currently. I will pass it to Marco.
Sometimes known as Marco Polo, the actual last name, Marko Dumancic, Assistant Provost for Faculty Development and Student Success at Western Kentucky University. And I'll pass it to Amanda.
Good afternoon, everyone. Amanda Ellis. I'm the VP of K-12 Policies and Programs here at CPE, and just thrilled to be on this group and see the progress. I will pass it along to Sandra.
Sandra Kimberlane, ECTC, KCTCS, Director of Academic Advising at Elizabethtown. And I'll pass to Maria.
Hi, I'm Maria Gallion. I'm from Jefferson Community and Technical College, and I'm the coordinator for our first year experience. And I will pass it to Travis.
Good afternoon. I'm Travis Muncy. I'm the Executive Director of Data Research and Advanced Analytics at the Kentucky Council on Post-Secondary Education. And I will pass it to Chris.
Hey, everyone. I'm Chris Ledford. I work with Travis, and I'm the Associate Director of Data and Advanced Analytics at CPE. And that's Katie.
Good afternoon, I'm Katie Adamczyk. I am the Director of Student Success at the University of Louisville. And Phyllis.
I knew that was coming. Hi, everybody. I'm Phyllis Clark, and I serve as Associate Director here at the Student Success Collaborative. Oh, and I'm not sure who's not gone. Is that Leah? Can I pass it to Leah?
Hi, I'm Leah Murphy. I was asked to serve as a parent advisor on this council.
I think I'm the last one. I'll just nominate myself. I'm Matthias Mayer. I'm the Assistant Provost for Retention Services at the University of Pikeville.
Thank you, Matthias. Okay, Joette, want to introduce you?
Joette Fields. I'm a business specialist CPE in the K-12 Policy and Programs Unit.
Thanks, Joette. Okay, we'll turn it over to Travis.
Good afternoon again. Like I said before, I'm Travis Muncy, the Executive Director of Data Research Advanced Analytics, and I'm joined by Dr. Chris Ledford, who is also the Associate Director with our unit. Just to kind of give some context of how this came about, we had some conversations with Amanda in our data group for CEC, and through those conversations, it seemed like that there was at least interest in kind of looking at some of the research that has been done at the CPE and specifically within our unit around first year student success. So when looking at what we had out there, we had done some extensive research in the past around academic readiness and specifically around well, just to back it up a little more, at one point we were looking to change the readiness policy, which we have done. And to support that, we created an analysis to both look at to look at whether GPA was a statistically significant predictor of first year student success, and to also look at and see whether our students would be more successful if we move to the ACT threshold for both reading, English, and math. So kind of with that context, that's where we went. So we'll start out with some slides around that research. And then we'll end with Chris kind of giving a sneak peek into what we're doing with our unmet need and kind of how that affects student success. And the analysis we're kind of doing around our research agenda. So kind of with that said and with that context, I will go ahead and share my screen here. I always get confused. Like, we go back and forth between Zoom and Teams so much, I forget where things are at. There we go. Are you all able to see that? Probably not. How about now?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Like I said before, this research was really centered around supporting our academic affairs team in the process of reevaluating the readiness standards. So kind of the two questions that were big then were both, should we move to the ACT standards and should we incorporate GPA in readiness standards? And kind of some of the research questions that we had around that were the ACT benchmarks appropriate for as a college readiness indicator? And how do Kentucky ACT benchmarks compare to national ACT benchmarks? And then we also looked to see if GPA was a substantive predictor of post-secondary success. I'm sorry, I don't speak too well sometimes. And how does the ACT composite score impact first year GPA and second year retention and persistence? Our data sample was over 6 years. Like I said, this research was done a couple years ago, so we do have a couple more years of data. We haven't updated the research since, but we also had to give the students time to, actually take gateway courses or their first year courses and kind of see what those outcomes were. Our independent variables used were ACT math score, ACT reading score, ACT English score, and then the ACT composite score. And some of the outcome variables were whether they passed a math gateway course, an English gateway course, their first year GPA in college, their second year persistence, and their second year retention. And just kind of for context, the difference between that second year persistence would be they came back at any institution within the state of Kentucky, and second year retention is specific to that the student returned to that same institution the following fall of matriculation. The covariants used were gender, race, Pell Grant, and a high school GPA, weighted high school GPA. And the fixed effects for cohort and institutions. And kind of the methods used, it was a binary logistic regression analysis. So to start the conversation, just to kind of look to see how Kentucky differs to what ACT gives as their benchmark scores. So in Kentucky, we have a benchmark score of 19 for math, 18 for English, and 20 for reading. The national ACT benchmark scores are 22 for math, 18 for English, and then 22 for reading. So part of the analysis was to see whether, like I said before, whether we should move to those national benchmarks away from our Kentucky benchmarks. And we also split this up between our four-year public universities and then KCTCS, and the cohorts within KCTCS were split up between technical track students and academic track students. So what we found when we're looking at the key takeaways from ACT Math was that both the both the benchmark score in Kentucky and nationally was a significant predictor. What we did, we looked at the success rate. So what we meant by success rate was the probability that a student would receive a C or higher in their first year Gateway math course. I think within a year and a half of college enrollment. So based on our model, we saw that there was a 69.8% probability that a Kentucky student or that at a 19 benchmark in math that a student would receive a C or higher, and that if we looked at that same national benchmark, it was 71.9, which means that if we would have moved, and this is all, I guess, past tense now, but if we would have moved to that 22 math benchmark, then it would have been a 2.1 percentage point increase in the probability that a student would receive a C or higher in their first math course, their first credit bearing math course, basically. And we also looked and to see what the impact would be. So it would have impacted 1,767 students that would have became not prepared if we had moved to that 22 benchmark score instead of the 19 benchmark score. But what we also did, and this is really important, when creating the new readiness standards, where we did the same, basically, we ran the same model against high school GPA and kind of looked to see where those probabilities met, both on the ACT benchmark side and on the high school GPA side. And we saw that between the high school GPA between 3.25 and 3.5 was equivalent to that, to the 19 or 22 math benchmark, as far as its predictive value on being able to predict receiving a C or higher. So we did find that both high school GPA and math ACT scores were highly predictive of first year student success. And by first year student success, we mean earning a C or higher in the first Gateway course in that area. So if kind of what we were trying to do was to create the high school GPA equivalent as far as predictive value to what our ACT benchmark was, so that we could include GPA in our readiness standards. And basically, this is just going over basically what I just said, but you know, we did find both high school GPA and ACT to be predictive. We also looked at reading. We also found that they were both significant predictors. There wasn't much of a difference between the Kentucky and national scores, and in fact, they were pretty much statistically the same. You know, it did actually decrease by 1 percentage point. But we did find that it would affect many students, 1,338. And then again, we did the same thing to where we ran the same model against high school GPA to kind of find those equivalencies.
Travis, I had a quick question on math. It was just about, so because we have co-rec, is that's considered, so even a student that goes into a co-requisite course, are they factored in, or is this just would they go into a traditional college level course?
Yes. So, yes. So they would be included if they went to a co-rec course, because it would be anyone that received a passing grade within a credit bearing course. So the co-requisite courses would be credit bearing.
Okay. So I guess I'm just trying to factor in, so those 1,700 students for math, I'm thinking of the math one. So of those students who would have been considered not ready, they would have been in the same co-requisite class potentially as they would have been otherwise. Or would they have otherwise been in a traditional class, and now if they're considered unready, then they'd be in a co-rec class?
Yes. So they would have been in a traditional class. So those 1,000, like in this case, so for reading, they're 1,338 students. So they were put into a normal class now, but if the benchmark was changed to the national benchmark, they would have been considered underprepared in that area and would have had to went to the co-requisite route. and this is specifically if they would have been made, this has been specifically if they would have been made underprepared by the ACT benchmark. So in our previous readiness policy, there were many ways to become prepared in a certain area outside of just ACT. But this is specifically just looking at ACT and kind of, because that is kind of the main standardized test that's used. But there are other ways to do. There's other standardized tests. So, you know, SAT, Coyote, those tests, there were institutional tests they could take to become prepared, and they could also be excluded from being underprepared if they had taken a dual credit course in that area. So in the previous readiness policy, there were a lot of different avenues to become underprepared, even if you didn't meet the benchmark scores.
And even if you are underprepared, if you are in a co-rec course, you could still hit the success metric of completing college level math in your first year.
Exactly.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and it used to be a little more difficult before the co-rec model because, you know, they would have to take a developmental course, which wouldn't be a credit bearing course. And then it would usually take them, if they even stayed in college after that, it would take them a longer period of time to get that credit bearing grade. Yeah. And like I said, I'm not going to spend too much time on these, but just wanted to kind of give you a sense of what the outcomes were of the study. As far as ACT English, you know, we actually found that it wasn't necessarily a significant predictor of student success, but the success rate for C or higher was 87%. And then we also did go ahead and find that equivalency. It is very similar to math and reading between that, you know, 3.25 and 3.5. Sorry. And then we also took a look at ACT composite, where we found that the ACT composite score was a very significant, was very statistically significant to predict a student to receive a grade C or higher, their first year GPA, and also whether they would be retained in their second year. So we did the same analysis with KCTCS. We found a little bit bigger significance with KCTCS. So this is looking at academic track students. So if we would have moved from 19 to 20, that would have taken the success rate of students for a predicted success rate from 68.1% to 73.4%, which would have been a 5.3 percentage point increase. It would have impacted around 800 students. And as far as the equivalent GPA, as far to be able to predict the C or higher for the students, that is between a 3.0 and a 3.25. And kind of the takeaway, you know, what we said, that it would increase 5.3 percentage points, or it would be predicted to increase 5.3 percentage points, or at least increase the probability of success. And a high school GPA between 3.25 and 3.5 can be used as an equivalent benchmark to an ACT math score of 19.
What that kind of says to me is that students with a 22 on their ACT are more likely to be successful in a KCTCS course than at a four-year institution of the same course. Is that what it says to you?
Yes. Hold on, let me go back and take another look.
Because the 19, the students that had a 19, their success rate was about the same, like 68.9 and then 68.1, but there was a bigger difference with the national and them being more successful in KCTCS at that rate, at that score.
Yeah, so it would have, it does look like it would have a bigger impact on KCTCS. Or I see what you're saying, that the predicted probability of a student that had a 22 on their ACT math from KCTCS, that probability is higher than what it was at the four-year public institution, which may be kind of a matching issue, to where maybe, you know, a student at a four-year institution may be taking a more rigorous math course, maybe not just college algebra, but, you know, maybe a higher level, you'll have a higher proportions of students that are taking higher level math. So that may play into it. So it may just be more of a matching issue to where that a student that receives that has a 22 or higher and attends KCTCS maybe taking a lower level math course than say someone at a four-year public institution. Does that make sense?
Sure, yeah.
And then basically, we had the key takeaways similar with the other ones. That the probability of a student would rise 5.3 percentage points if we were to move to the from a 19 to a 22. And then we also looked at another group of students, which was the technical track students, where we saw similar results to where both were significant predictors. 66.7% probability that a student receive a C or higher if they had a 19 ACT score, and that jumped to a 71.3 if they had a 22, which was a 4.6 percentage point increase. And if that change was made, that would affect around 698 students. But we did find a little bit lower of an equivalent high school GPA than what we did with the academic track students. And basically that's just the key takeaways. And as far as reading, for the academic track, but that both scores were a significant predictor. Looks like a much smaller increase, from the a 69% probability to over a 70% probability. That represents a 1.1 percentage point increase. And if the change would have been made, we estimated that would have affected a little over 1,000 students with an equivalent high school GPA at around 3.0, which perfectly matches kind of the probability from the 20 Kentucky benchmark. And on the technical side, we saw a similar increase. Both significant predictors. The success rate went from 66.6% to 67.9%, which represents a 1.3 percentage point increase. And if it would have went into place, it would have affected a little over 1,000 students. And the key takeaways from the technical side was, very similar to what it was from the academic side. The only big difference was that a lower GPA was still highly predictive from the technical track students. So kind of that probability equivalent from the high school GPA to the ACT score would range from like a 2.75 to a 3.0, which was a little bit lower than what it was from the academic students. And then as far as English, again, for the academic side, it was a significant predictor. Success rate of C or higher was at 68.4. And of course, we don't have, these are the same for the national and Kentucky benchmark score. So we don't have them compared here. But that equivalent was around a 3.0 high school GPA. And then similar with the technical track, it was a 65.9%. And the equivalent high school GPA, again, was a little bit lower than it was from the academic track, which was at a 2.75. And then we looked at the ACT composite score. And again, the ACT composite score was a strong predictor for a grade C or higher, and also of the first year GPA. And we did run into some issues with the second year persistence, but it was a very strong predictor of a C or higher in the first year GPA. And so these were our overall conclusions based on this study. The findings suggest that raising Kentucky's ACT math benchmark from 19 to 22 will increase students' probability of success at four-year public universities and KCTCS, which we kind of thought would be the case anyway. You know, if a student receives a higher score on the standardized test, then you would assume they would do better in their kind of their first gateway course. And then the findings suggest that raising Kentucky's ACT benchmark from 20 to 22 will not increase students' probability of success at four-year universities or KCTCS. And then here we give a chart of kind of what those equivalent high school GPAs look like based on the same model. So you can see at what point a high school GPA will give the same probabilities as what the current benchmark scores are for ACT. Yep. And let me stop sharing and we can discuss. In theory. Hold on, let me try to find it here.
Robert, do you have a question?
Yeah. I saw the covariates of gender, race, Pell eligibility in high school GPA reported on the aggregate. Were any analytics run with those independently to see if any stood out more than others, like was gender or race more significant of a factor than some of the others, or was the model inclusive of all the covariants and it's just reported on the aggregate?
Yeah, so the model was inclusive of all the covariants. It was mostly just for this specific use case. It was more since the readiness, because this was specific to kind of inform the readiness policy changes. So that's why it was just broken out in aggregate, basically, because we were more concerned about the overall population. I do think that there is at least some conversation about updating the study and doing it more of and what I can do, I can also send you all kind of the full research report that came out of the study that has the full model output and kind of the explanations around it, if that would be helpful. But I do think that it would be beneficial to update the current model with the most recent years, and also break it out within those subgroups to see how kind of what the differential effect is there. So I guess that's a long way of saying not specifically for this model that we created, but it would be very easy to kind of break that out if we were to update the model and kind of do a new release out of it. But usually we always break it out with those different subgroups, just so that we can answer any, equity questions or at least put an equity lens on it.
Travis, we actually had a few, some of our the first priority of this work group is around academic readiness and support. And we had brainstormed a few action steps in our previous meeting, and several of them focused on research. So I'll just kind of throw those out there to you and see, does this already exist, or would it be pretty easy to add or modify an existing report? So one is around, it says request analysis of first year post-secondary success, which honestly, I think we're talking about college level math and college level English course success. For students who earned college credit in high school versus those that did not. So that was one of the areas we were interested in. And then another was trying to figure out, kind of like how you looked at ACT and GPA, how do different placement tests, how accurate are they, I guess, in helping place students in the best course for them, since there are so many options out there and different institutions do things a lot of different ways, just trying to find maybe a best practice that could be shared. And then the third one, I think you've answered here, is analyze how strong a predictor high school GPA is for college level course success. So you have a good band, and the band, even though it only accounts for maybe 68 or 70% of students that have that similar GPA being successful, it's still it's helpful to answer that question, I guess.
Yeah, and I do think, so we did do a similar study with dual credit students to where we kind of looked at first year GPA with, and it was kind of that binary of the cohorts where they either had a dual credit experience or they didn't have a dual credit experience, and then kind of looked at first year success with that. It was kind of limited. We did break it out by subgroup, more specifically between URN students and low income students, and kind of looked to see how, whether those groups were more or less affected by having a dual credit experience. And kind of that cross section is where we saw the biggest impact, which was students that were both URM and low income seemed to have the biggest benefit from a dual credit experience. But we do have that research, but then again, like I said, that's a couple years old. What we are working on is what we call the dual credit 3.0 research, which includes many more factors, such as whether the dual credit course was taught by a high school teacher or a post-secondary teacher, and what kind of course they took, whether it was a math course, an English course, or maybe in some other area. So with that was one of the things that Grace was working on when she left, but Chris has actually been doing a great job of picking up that mantle and starting with that research. So we have the data set for that. So now we do plan to start that or restart that analysis soon. So we should have some good research around that, and we can even update our existing research, hopefully, to try to at least get newer years of kind of the same outcomes that we already have.
So we are also, I think, interested in like gateway course success. And so I just want to make sure I understand, like, the data that you're sharing right here on college level course success is not COREC. It's only the traditional non-COREC college level courses, right?
No, it's all. So basically we just look to see, based on the ACT score and high school GPA that student had, whether or not they received a C or higher in their first course in that area that was credit bearing. So that could include COREC. So if they received an A, B, C, or D, or an AB or a C with in that COREC course, and it was credit, and of course all COREC is credit bearing now. So then they would be included in that.
Okay, so to be college ready and then to take a COREC, like that's not counter whatever our words are. Like, I'm just curious from faculty perspective, Marco, anybody else?
Yeah, I mean, Lily, I'm kind of stuck with that too, because at U of L, right, we have our Gen 103, 104, which are our math foundational courses that don't count towards Gen Ed, and we have Gen 105, which is our reading one. And so they're not, they are in that sense extra courses because they're not degree requirements, they're preparatory, and they're not, and we don't do the COREC model, right? So it's not like they're taking Gen 104 with college algebra. They have to take Gen 104 before college algebra. And so when I think about the college readiness, I'm thinking like, well, we want them to place into the Gen Ed. I don't know.
And I think I understand what you're saying now, Lily. I apologize. I think I misunderstood the question. So yes, when we're looking at students that received a 19 on their ACT math, they are deemed college ready. So they wouldn't go the co-requisite path. Now, as far as just looking at high school GPA, then in that sense, they still could have went the co-requisite path. It would be possible. But as far as the ACT, if they received a 19 in math, they were deemed math ready, by CPE standards. So I guess it's possible they could have entered a program that would have required a higher math standard. So say they weren't taking, quantitative reasoning, say they were taking college algebra or calculus, then I think at the institution, depending on the program, they could still be considered not college ready and have to take, a lower level math class before they're able to take the higher level math classes.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood your question, Lily.
No, that's fine. And so I guess the separate research question, I'd be very interested in some kind of analysis around success in the co-rec courses and how, you know, if this is our even more vulnerable population coming in, those that are maybe underprepared slightly, but they can get in a co-rec and still complete college level credit if successful, you know, what are the predictors, you know, of that success? And Marco, I want to hear your question.
More of a, if it's valuable, when we started investigating the DFW rates in our gateway courses, and we don't have co-requisites, they just had take the general education course, when accounting for multiple factors, whether it's Pell eligibility, first gen status, or URM, and even county high schools, the GPA was the only statistically significant predictor of success, at least for our courses.
What was your threshold for that GPA?
3.0, I think. So if students who had earned a 3.0 in high school were much more likely to earn a C or higher, and those below much more likely to earn a D, F, or a W.
Yeah, and that's what we ended up going with too, Marco. Like in the actual readiness policy that was released that actually started this fall, was that 3.0 cutoff. So now you can basically become ready within you know, math, reading, or English, based on the standardized score. So that would be the standardized test. I think now it's just ACT, SAT, Coyote, GED, college readiness, AccuPlacer, Alex, and then EdReady. But if you're not, then the next step is the institution has so it's still up to the institution, but they can make you ready if you have a 3.0 or higher high school GPA. So at that point, you know, you don't have to follow the co-requisite course. So 3.0 is usually where a lot of the kind of the similar studies come out at. So I'm not surprised to hear that it was like that at WKU too.
Right.
And any other questions around just, you know, the readiness policy? I know there's so many different ways, so I love the feedback, you know, to see how we can analyze this, and more than anything, what would be helpful to this work group.
Well, we'll definitely follow up because the whole discussion today is like, what are the next steps? And we've prioritized academic readiness support as a primary area. And so communicating readiness, benchmarks to parents and students, I think like the whole placement process, if students, you know, multiple measures or however students are being identified for the appropriate level course, you know, that's one of our themes. So we will probably be following up for sure with some good research questions for you.
Perfect. And Lily, if you've got a few minutes, is it okay if Chris kind of just gives a preview of the unmet need research and kind of what's coming up with that? I think that'll probably also be interesting for this group.
It would be very interesting. We are already 10 minutes behind, but Chris,
Okay,
how
never
fast
mind.
do you think you can do it? No, it's okay.
Yeah.
Chris, do you think you can do it in like 10 minutes or less?
Yeah, can you hear me okay? Okay, good. Sorry, I didn't know if my sound was coming through. Yeah, I can get this done in about 3 minutes, I think. Primarily because I'm really excited and really fired up about this impactful, important, and ongoing research that we're conducting in my area at CPE. So in support of the strategic priority area around affordability, our team is undertaking an in-depth analysis of how unmet financial need impacts second-year retention among our first-time students. And unmet need is defined as the cost of attendance minus the sum of the expected family contribution and any grant aid from the institution, the state, or the federal government that the student receives. To date, the research literature overall describes how unmet need is increasingly a burden to students related to what we all know, the rising cost of attendance, and stagnant wages, and lead students to work longer hours, take out more loans, and become more indebted, and lead students potentially to have an impact on their success. Recently, some of you have also probably heard about the LEADS research that came out of the University of Kentucky, where they found compelling evidence that unmet need impacts retention among their students. In our research, we're investigating the consequences of unmet need for our students across Kentucky and at the institutional level. And we're taking a deep dive into the impact of unmet need among over 250,000 first-time students at the Commonwealth's R1 comprehensive and 2-year public institutions over the past decade. Therein lies our novel contribution, investigating and providing insights about how unmet need affects retention across institutional contexts. So far, our fixed effect structural equation models provide compelling evidence that while accounting for other factors that influence student success, unmet need is a significant burden to first-time students across all of our institutions. It has a substantive and deleterious impact on second-year retention. And critically, that burden tends to be more significant and larger for our most vulnerable populations of students, including URM students, underprepared students, and students who come from Eastern Kentucky. Now what we're working on is identifying critical thresholds at those institutions. So each institution, public institution in our state, where a level of unmet need makes a first-time student less likely to be retained relative to first, their cohort, and second, the institution's KPI target retention for 2023 and 2024. So while we're wrapping that up, we look forward to getting to the bottom of that and then having some good actionable discussions with our institutional partners, work groups like this, and policymakers. Know that was a lot. Happy to take any questions, or we can yield back to the agenda.
I'll just say I'm super excited about this work and just want to make sure that I figure out how to stay informed. I'm noting the things, talk to my vice provost about to make sure it's on his radar, because this is definitely an area that we're talking about at U of L. So thank you for diving into it and keeping us informed along the way.
Absolutely.
I had just a quick question. In your model, we're talking about unmet need, are you treating it as something that could increase over time, right? So your tuition keeps building up and building up over your first, your second, your third, fourth years. Are you able to look across time to see, well, if you've managed to make it through your first year, is it then the second year tuition that gets you? Can you look for those kinds of relationships?
I know that Kentucky, the University of Kentucky, in their research, they kind of looked at unmet need over time. The impetus for focusing in the first year, right? We all know that once you make it, put everything on the back burner. Once you make it to the second year, on average, retention goes up above 80, and in some institutions over 90%. It's that first year success. So that's kind of why they critically focus on that first year, and why we are as well. Truth be told, they actually found in some of their models that unmet need was a more substantive and significant predictor of second year retention than was the first year GPA, which is really profound in my opinion.
So yes, Leah, we have the capability, and we will. It's out of this. I think it's out of scope of what we're trying to do now, but it's definitely something. This research has kind of led to a million other questions, right? So, like all research does. So it's definitely something we'll want to look into going forward.
Marco, go ahead.
No, Lily, you had a good question. I'd be curious. Is that in the chat?
Oh, Yeah, I was assuming that unmet need is just the leftover tuition balance that a student has to pay through working and out-of-pocket ways, but it doesn't take into effect some of their other expenses like cost of living and basic needs kind of things.
It is the full cost of attendance. So it's not just tuition. So it's the full cost of attendance and then minus grant scholarships and expected family contribution.
It does it minus loans as well?
No. So there is a conversation there on whether to include subsidized loans or not. We went with more the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation definition that doesn't kind of subtract those. But there are different ways to do it. Some people do subtract that. So that I would say that's more of a remaining cost and unmet need, subtracting out the loans. But in our calculation, we don't subtract out loans.
Okay.
And just because I'm super impatient, I was wondering if there are any sort of preliminary results on what that threshold might be. Any guesses?
Did Tuesday put you up to this, Marco?
Maybe.
So far, I can say, again, keep in mind I'm working with a whole lot of institutions across a long period of time. But I've seen the range of unmet need impacting retention. I've seen in some cases where each $1,000 increase in unmet financial need has about a 1 percentage point decrease on predicted second-year retention. In some institutions and in some contexts, I've seen that number go as high as 2.5% decrease in retention for each $1,000. So anywhere in that range, you can see unmet need has a really substantive and profound impact on retention.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
I appreciate all the questions and look forward to chatting again with everybody about this in the future. And anything comes up, feel free to shoot an email. Lily, it's back to you.
Thank you both so much.
Sorry, Lily. We broke your agenda. You'll know better than to ask us back next time.
I know Robert can get us back on track. I'm not worried. Okay, I'm going to go back and turn it over to Robert.
All right.
Can you see my screen?
I can.
Okay.
And even though I just got a glowing endorsement of getting us back on track, and I will, I will also say that it might be interesting to look at that unmet need in terms of proportion to that specific institution's total cost, as opposed to maybe just the breakdown, because what it is at the University of Kentucky might be a little bit different than what that same threshold is at another institution. But anyway, unmet need, while it seems very obvious, there's a whole lot of nuance that can really come out of that sort of research and through that perspective. But thank you all. So things that we're going to shift gears, and we're really going to start to look through what are some of those, I'm going to remind you quickly, what are those things that we've already brought to the surface that we really we feel is important. And then we're going to get to the point in just a moment where we rank some of these action steps. So just to give you a quick reminder, and you'll have this in your email, so bear with me. We're going to go through this. There are 3 areas we're looking at today. I will tell you each of those really quickly, and then I'm going to just get into them specifically, and then we'll move into the rankings in just a moment. But we're looking at, of course, academic readiness and support, social capital and belonging, and then financial aid and literacy. For academic readiness and support, just to get everyone on the same page, and I do apologize that some of this is reading to you, but I just want to give you a reminder of what the themes are so that the rankings might be a little bit easier. We had decided that this work group recommended evaluating and adapting current academic placement processes, gateway course pedagogy, and academic support services to meet the needs of post-pandemic students and increase success in college level courses. Some of those themes that we will be ranking for this included implementing college placement tests in the spring for all Kentucky high school seniors, develop and implement a comprehensive communication strategy for dual credit, seek funding and vendor to provide statewide placement tests for all students at no cost to the students, develop strategic communications campaign to rebuild the culture of high expectations among students across the P through 20 continuum, develop and share communications tools to educate parents in advance about success indicators along the P through 20 continuum, request an analysis of first-year post-secondary success for students who earn college credit in high school versus those who did not, and we mentioned that a bit earlier. Research on placement tests as predictors, we talked about that. Analyze how strong a predictor high school GPA is, we talked about that. And provide statewide training for all P20 teachers in response to the effects of the COVID pandemic, because we've identified there's a bit of a ripple effect in terms of what's happening with folks being as ready for the next level of their courses. So after academic readiness and support, we're going to look at social capital and belonging.
Did you want to add, are there any discussions on this? Because we're hoping this is the opportunity to kind of tweak and modify the actual recommendation statement.
Mm-hmm.
I guess just one note in terms of, I guess maybe a discrepancy between the statement and the action step themes. The gateway course pedagogy is not necessarily reflected in the action steps. And I don't know, I guess if I'm missing it, I'm happy to be corrected.
I saw that same thing, Marco. So I think that the first year success, there's the preparation for first year success, and then there's actually like when they are first year students, how do we ensure their success? And Amanda, correct me if I'm wrong, but I've always kind of looked at this group as we have taken the baton and now they are college students. And so we may want to add that in as a recommendation, Marco, to really kind of focus on best practices and gateway course redesign or effective pedagogical practices, et cetera. I can add that in as a action step. I think it's good in the recommendation statement if that's what I heard you say, but we want to make sure it's reflected in the action steps as well.
Correct. Yes. Thank you.
Any other feedback or discussion on this one? I let my zeal for racing the clock get the best of me there.
I agree with Marco and Lily on that point about the gateway course pedagogy and sticking with that too, right, about readiness. And I mean, really, if we're thinking about what we're doing with students once they're in the first year, like, does the dual credit communication strategy fit? Like, is that the goal of this group? Those kinds of things. I think the placement pieces for me still matter greatly to make sure we're placing students accurately, and the fact that we just have a lot of students who don't take the placement test, and so easing that part would be really helpful to make sure that they're not only placed appropriately but obviously making progress more efficiently. So but when we're looking at that, if we're focused on specifically once they're with us, then I don't know that the dual credit piece fits. I thought maybe there was one other that had jumped out to me that may not fit, but now I don't see it. So.
Thank you, Katie. And just as a reminder, like I think we had this big Excel document that had all of these ideas of the state levers, and we had just brain dumped. And so this is the brain dump. And so when I know it's a ton of things to try to think about prioritizing, but I've already, it sounds like some will clearly come to the top. And if dual credit is 10th or whatever number it might be, that can just be our way of voting it down, I guess. Because you're right, there's a whole nother group focused on dual credit.
Well, and I think too, like, again, the first statement, I think, catches it pretty comprehensively. But then a lot similar to the gateway piece, like academic support services isn't really captured in the action steps, right? Like, is there an action that's needed around that? Do campuses feel like that's an area that's needed growth versus, like with ours right now, when I think about our tutoring or our writing center, some of it's a staffing issue for us. Some of it is also, you know, an hours availability, but generally like the philosophy of the work and the pedagogy of that work is solid, right? And so I think more too about when we think about our students who leave, it's the students who are only coming for courses, right? Only engaging with campus for the courses. And a lot of times it's, the data project, like the unmet need, they're really on the fringe of the institutional experience. So we really need to strengthen, in my mind, our first year class experience, our first year courses, because once we give them a really solid academic experience, then that academic integration tends to enhance all their campus integration. So I would, so like I highlighted on my sheet, like a bunch of the placement pieces and the gateway course pedagogy. Like for me, those are the key pieces.
So would you recommend any changes to this readiness statement or to this priority statement? It sounds like you would almost like remove academic supports as a called out priority or focus.
I don't know that I would remove it because I don't, like think about all institutions, but I do think we don't have an action step, like Marco's point with the gateway courses. We don't have an action step around it. So is there a specific place that we across this group in our institutional representation say, oh yeah, we agree that that's a piece that we need to keep building on, like I don't, so I'm not ready to make a recommendation that we remove it. I will say for me, the other two kind of bullets would be the priority.
And I'll echo Katie's sentiments in the sense that academic support is sometimes available to a particular segment of students, right? So we have to ensure that the class time, right, is the best that it can be, because not all students can access academic support services given family and work obligations.
Sandra or anybody of our two-year institutions, would y'all be able to share any thoughts on that too? I know Chris, you just came from BCTC, your voice is welcome. I don't know if I'm missing anybody. Maria, if you're still on.
I'm not sure I have anything else to add at this time.
Okay. Okay. And I think one piece of that, and maybe this is like foreshadowing or forecasting, but it seems like with the recent, our test results are so much lower than they've been, we're lower than 20 years or the lowest ACT in 20 years or something. I forget how scary the headline was. But anyway, basically, will we have an increased demand for our academic support services that we might have to be creative about how do we scale or how do we embed in the classroom for more students than have historically taken part in these resources? Just kind of thinking post-pandemic and some of the other academic trends that we're seeing.
I mean, I think that's well put, Lily. I think talking about embedded academic support services is a model that's underutilized on our campuses, but that's anecdotal more than anything else.
Yeah.
I've been talking with our written composition program director about where we decided not to do like writing intervention course. Instead, right, we worked with CPE years ago and did like smaller course sections. And partnership with the Writing Center. And the challenge is that we've never met our goal of reducing the class capacity. So when we did some benchmarking, like we lead in course capacities for ACC schools and for schools in Kentucky, like our written composition courses are fairly large, still at 22 to 26 students, and not able to do the intervention like their national organization recommends and things like that. So that's a way too to think about how we're looking at that gateway courses is the small size. Like we're looking at that as like a retention initiative here, that conversation, because that's a high touch, high impact course. And if we can address it in that way, instead of it being an add-on, that's something the students have to then also go to. So.
Okay. Any other thoughts on this one? We can head to the next one. Okay.
All right, we can review the statement and then some of the action steps and clarify right after. So this work group recommends scaling existing partnerships and pathways from high school to college with the aim of strengthening relationships among students, staff, and faculty to foster a sense of belonging, community, and support for all students pre-matriculation through degree completion. Would you all like to hear some of the action step themes first, or talk about this statement? We can jump on into some of the action step themes. And some of these it might make sense to combine some of these themes. So please be mindful of that, because we can certainly do that. The first, seek additional funds to continue and expand summer bridge programs. Seek funds earmarked for high quality or impactful early college visits and experiences in P12. Develop strategic communications campaigns to build the worthiness and culture of high expectations among students across the P20 continuum. Develop and disseminate criteria, characteristics, possibly a rubric for high quality college visits or early college experiences. Investigate high school student perceptions of online classes as it relates to sense of belonging and the use of technology. Coordinate a statewide community of practice for higher ed faculty on social integration of students in the classroom. Coordinate statewide professional learning for higher ed faculty on what it means and how to be student ready. Coordinate partnerships between higher ed and high school counselors to promote summer bridge and college visit opportunities. Provide training and assistance to establish peer coaching networks that extend from seniors in high school throughout the time in college. And develop communication pathways between high school and college advisors to understand student needs, such as help-seeking behaviors in college. What are some thoughts and feedback we have on this category?
So my initial thoughts about, we have 10 in this, this is a hefty category, and majority of them put the onus of belonging on the student. And so, I'm all about college access, started my career in Gear Up and federal grants work as well. And so it's like, yes, let's do summer bridge. Let's do these visits. Let's get them wanting and feeling like they can be a part of a college. But once they're here with us, 6 and 7 for me about social integration in the classroom and being student ready, like we really need to look at the cultural shift that we need to do on our campuses. And I'm really big right now at U of L on how we're engaging our faculty in that conversation, and also our faculty in the, like, what do they need, right? Like what feels different like about our students today, right? Like what information do they need? We don't do like a solid profile for our faculty, even of like, these are the students, these are the first year students, or in this major, right? This is the percentage that are first gen, or, these kinds of information pieces to help them think about the students they're serving, and so we'll do charges like anybody in higher ed, like faculty need to be more student ready, and then not ask the question of the flip side, right? Of the, what do you need? What does that mean to you? And so I'm really I was most excited about 6 and 7 for sure. And that's the flip too of the conversation from the other point is, are we talking about once the students are here, are we getting them ready to be here? And like, you know, what is that? What is our goal with the group's work? Because I'm, you know, I kind of switched my career from college access to college student success because of the fact that I had a hard time handing my students off to institutions. So I wanted to make sure institutions were ready to support students. And so that's where my passion lies. Thank you very much for the soapbox moment.
It feels like Katie and I coordinated notes today. But to me, 6 and 7, in particular, when we're talking about those gateway courses, because I think those gateway courses are often taught as if the incoming students were going to major in math or English, right? And I think those courses, rather than any kind of a first year course, should really be focused on how to prepare faculty to integrate students socially. So I feel like if we can establish, you know, some kind of a parallel between action step priorities in academic readiness and support, I think that would be ideal.
Instead of being gateway courses, they could be success courses. That a gatekeeper gateway, let's make them more focused on success. Because I feel like in a lot of cases, it's like, are you really person enough to make it through this class? I'm going to make this so rigorous that you're going to have to prove yourself to me.
I think that's exactly right. And when we're talking about especially gen ed courses, I mean, I always feel like teaching those courses is a privilege rather than a right, and that there's a particular kind of responsibility that comes in teaching those courses, and they shouldn't be like Sandra said, like I don't think they should be gatekeepers.
Tony, I'm interested also in your perspective. You know, you're doing a lot of that social belonging and support for students. Does this all resonate from your perspective?
It does. I'm just really listening today and so forgive me, but when you guys say gateway course, does that just mean gen ed in the first year? Just trying to confirm exactly what we're talking about here and how we support students to be successful in that. And I like what Katie said a minute ago about she changed from college access to the college side, so because she didn't like the handoff from students. I get that. I really get that. Just trying to
No, that's great to clarify, because my understanding, and I'm not going to say that I'm the expert, but is that the gateway course is the first course a student takes in that discipline. And we specifically focus on their success in their first college level math course and their first college level English course, because those are much more highly predictive of completion. So if they don't get through that first year, their first college level math course in the first year, or maybe the first 3 semesters, then they're just much less likely to ultimately complete their degree. Does anybody else want to add more to that?
Yeah. Lily, can you hear me?
Yes. Hi, Phyllis.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm in the street now. So I'm in my car headed to get my daughter. So please excuse any noise. So thank you, Tony, for bringing that up. So I facilitate the community of practice for co-requisite. And so right now there are probably 30 or 40, it's growing by the day, it seems, of math and English faculty who are having conversations around helping students to be successful, but they're putting the onus back on themselves, to Katie's point. And so they're trying to understand, how to work through particular components or elements of their courses, how to engage with students, how to be more practical, more communicative. One of the biggest things, when we sat down in one of our first meetings and tried to organize some priorities, their top 3 seem to be about helping students to understand the value of the gateway courses so they can, operate through some mindset shifts of their own. But there are a ton of faculty out there working together now to crosstalk and to challenge each other on how to make things better from the faculty perspective, from the faculty side. And so just wanted to add that.
Yeah, thank you, everyone, for explaining that a little further, because I wasn't sure. I thought it might be something like that. So we're not necessarily looking at, math and English for math and English majors, but as a general education course. But it could also be for if they were majoring in that. So it's so the courses that we're looking at that tell us, so when they take the ACT, okay, they should be successful in math, they should be successful in English because they hit benchmark. I think, the major from a social and emotional perspective, and from what I'm hearing from students, is they don't necessarily want the onus taken off them. They just want to have a clearer understanding of what's required, and they want to be supported in those endeavors. So they want to belong as a part of that course experience. So I think some of the students that I've worked with, they come in and they're overwhelmed because it seems like the student or the faculty is taking so much on themselves that the student has no idea what's going on, even though they're trying to do the opposite. For instance, the faculty member had said, you're going to have a test each week. We're going to make sure that we're reviewing the test in advance. We'll grade the test together. We'll review it after it's done. And then, at the end of the semester, they broke down the syllabus. Well, I guess this particular faculty decided not to do that, but he didn't explain to the students why. And so I'm getting emails of students freaking out, like, we were supposed to have 4 tests already and we're not having any tests, things like that. So I know it's not, that's about the social emotional component of it and how they are receiving or perceiving that class structure. I don't know if I'm making any sense. Trying to pass on what I've been, what I've been hearing. So I think there's a fine line between setting those expectations, like we mentioned in some of our action items, and making sure that students are setting those expectations starting early, and then having the high support. I don't think that we have to reinvent the wheel necessarily. I don't think we have to do more than what's needed, but finding that sweet spot is probably the key.
Thank you.
For what it's worth.
Yeah. So I feel like we have a pretty good connection to belonging and social capital, like inside the classroom. Do we also feel like that's represented in the kind of co-curricular, the outside the classroom? Do we have any action steps that are really speaking to that as well? We have the early college stuff. Is there anything else that we might be missing with that first year experience in building in belonging and community?
We have the action item or the theme, develop communication pathways between high school and college advisors to understand student needs, such as help-seeking behaviors in college. I think that relates to your question.
Mm-hmm.
And then the seek funds. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say it relates a lot, right, to the Kentucky Purpose First, and it talk around the FYE courses and where we're talking, how we're integrating students into that that exploratory and decision-making work, which I do think increases belonging when students are told day one that they're here to figure it out and we're here to figure it out with them. So there's some messaging and some curricular or programmatic pieces that can come with it. I'll always lean curricular because that's where our students are first, is in the classroom. And so how we engage students in that process, because if our students, especially our first gen students, come with a professional degree program in mind because that's going to get them a job, and then they realize that doesn't fit, a lot of them choose to leave instead of doing the work with us to figure out the next option. And so we need to engage them in the exploring the options and evaluating the options as soon as possible. So I would say adding an action step around FYE courses and the Kentucky Purpose First implementation could be.
And I'm glad you said that, because that's something that I was going to say, but I was going to take it a little further. And I think that, we do FYE and a lot, it's in that first semester. And sometimes students aren't struggling within that first semester. So for, what would a true first year experience do for these students? It would give them some more time to explore. And if they have a setback, to work with someone within a class that they don't have to, go somewhere else when they're on their way to work or whatever it may be.
Well, it's either they're not struggling, they don't value it yet because they haven't, they haven't struggled. They don't value, they're like, really, why do I have to do this? Right. So how do we keep them engaged longer, right? So that
That's true too.
So that they have experienced, some discomfort or whatnot, where they're questioning things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. But I agree 100%. We need to add that as an action step.
Okay. I've got a notes page over here, so I'm definitely taking all of this down as well. Okay, how about we move on to the third one?
All right, the work group recommends increasing awareness of post-secondary financial aid opportunities, processes, timelines, and responsibilities so that students and families can be well prepared and well informed about how to pay for college in order to minimize financial barriers and burdens that hinder attainment of post-secondary degrees and certificates. We only have a couple action themes here. The first is communicate with students and families about cost and financial aid processes, timelines, and awards. Communicate the value and importance of placement testing to help save money. Execute a strategic communications campaign related to work-ready college scholarships. Administer a Trellis student financial wellness survey to understand Kentucky trends in financial wellness and non-academic barriers. What are some points of discussion or questions or clarification we have around this area?
One thing that I, want to say here is in partnering with a couple different institutions. I'm new to the post-secondary world, so when we start talking about FAFSA, and I'm working with my first year students on these FAFSA renewals, I'm finding that at the institution of higher education level, that they're focusing on helping seniors in high school with FAFSA. And so I have a lot of students who I need help with the renewal. I don't quite understand what this means for financial aid. And sometimes, I don't know how really to say it, but it seems like, and we have to focus on enrollment. We have to focus on admissions and things of that nature. I think we move on to that next enrollment class when our current students need more support and information. Their families need more information. And not just information, but they need opportunities, whether that's an event, whether that's a FAFSA Frenzy campaign for first year students, or, what's the difference between subsidized and unsubsidized, because I took unsubsidized and I have no idea what that is, whatever it may be.
Right, like, am I unmuted? Right, like build off Tony there on the sense that, our first year students, continuing students need coaching around what is my master promissory note? How is that different from entrance counseling? What is this? What is that? Why am I still? So they're like, well, I accepted everything. So now what? And it's like, they still have so many steps in the process. And we put them in a checklist, like to-do checklist, and we being U of L, I'm not involved, but right, like assume that's enough, and it's just not enough, right? So it is about how do we advertise the support and services for that, normalize asking questions around that, hosting the taking care of business work. And, you know, we were talking even about using phrases like taking care of business with our, during orientation, during welcome week. Like this is, it's hard to be a college student these days. There's a lot of business to take care of. So we need to make sure that we're walking with students through those processes, because I know that most parents, even if they went to college, will be surprised right today how much business there is to take care of still, right? So that's a big piece for us, and especially in the SSC, that our coordinators work with students a lot on making sure they understand, you know, verification has been not as near a pain as it used to be with all the leniency because of the pandemic, but even, you know, the verification process and the anytime students have to provide documentation of support for their FAFSA, you know, those things are overwhelming. So that's a huge part of it.
I just have a quick question about kind of thinking about the state levers that we talked about. You know, what does that look like? So the financial literacy and support for our first year and continuing students, college students, is it a communications campaign? I mean, what does the state lever, as opposed to the institutional lever, you know, what would we be recommending here?
Well, oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I think just adding that clarifying comment, first year and continuing goes a long way to get to that, because it's sort of a combo marketing and educational campaign. But for the folks, just for my comment really quickly, and Tony, I will stop talking so you can. We really target first and second year students to come to some of these FAFSA workshops, just because it was forever ago whenever folks first did that. And usually after the first few times of doing it, those folks are better equipped to do FAFSA later on. But I do think just calling it what it actually is, it is first year, or like it's pre-matriculation through. That's the targeted population. But anyway, I will stop.
Thank you. That helps.
And those things are definitely needed. I've had some conversations about these types of events in other places, and they're like, well, they can come in anytime they want and complete it, or they can just, you know, set up a time to come in and meet with us. And I understand that, and that's awesome. They need that resource, but at the same time, we have a bunch of students who do not want to seek help. You know, I have to continually reach out and go see them and sit outside their classrooms to get them to talk to me about what they need. So yeah, I mean, as much as a resource as you are, if we can advertise other things that they're going to see value in, and I know, you know, incentives or motivators or whatever is not always the answer. They need to be self-motivated, especially at that level. So I think the communication action item is critical. I don't know which one it is, but continuing or building upon how do they say it? Govember. That's what it is. The Govember campaign, or and I think maybe utilizing Kia. I think sometimes they're often forgot after senior year that Kia is still a great resource. And I know Eastern's bringing them in to do some things for families, but I still think there is that need for students to get the communication and know that those opportunities are out there. So just trying to relate that to your levers conversation or question.
A little bit of a turn from that discussion, but in the priority statement, can we just say very last sentence of post-secondary credentials, because the community and technical college also does diplomas in the middle of that, and that gets a little wordy. So maybe we just say credentials.
Should we do degrees and credentials, or you're saying just post-secondary credentials, which includes degrees?
It would include that. I mean, that's just to make it shorter, so we don't have to put all the possible options.
Yeah. Yes, I've made that update in the notes, Sandra. Thank you.
Well, and the first part of that statement recommends increasing awareness. So it's really already written as a focused communication plan recommendation. So I think that the other part of that is, do we also then say, you know, like how we have in the first part, the very first recommendation, academic support services, something around, you know, financial support services, you know, UK's, what do you all call your coaching people, your financial coach, like peer coaches, right? You know, there's these roles, Robert.
Yeah, sorry, it took me a minute to unmute.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have some financial wellness coaches and other, yeah, but yeah, to your point, absolutely,
Yeah.
Nathan, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, you know, doing something around not just increasing awareness. And I agree too, again, Tony, at least we're all supportive of each other's ideas today, right? Like I was looking at Kia's website because I was like, yeah, I mean, for me, Kia is always about getting the incoming students here. And U of L doesn't use some of the services that other institutions use with Kia, but I know, right, that Kia could do a lot of these. They could be like a call center. They could be, you know, something of the effect of they can coach students through some of these processes. They can answer questions and explain. And so that's a statewide lever where it's like, well, how do we utilize, enhance what Kia offers?
I see Maria wrote that JCTC has used their resources in FYE courses as well. That's Kia resources, Maria?
Yes. They have some free brochures and everything else, little booklets that have activities in them that we've used in the past.
Right.
Robert, what was your department again? Your director of?
So the big area is called Student Community Resources and Services, but we have within my area, it's an office that serves first gen, off campus, veterans, LGBTQ resource center, and the community professional development program. So I have quite a few different offices.
Because I would love the opportunity. I know we've been looking for a way to support our students matriculating to UK. And because you guys do have so many great resources and offer so many things, it's been kind of a challenge. So I would love to be able to come in and maybe just observe some of those types of financial aid events and things that you all do at some point. But I'll reach out to you.
Sounds good.
Oh, we have great things going on at U of L too, Tony, if you want to come on over.
Okay. If I can talk them into letting me go to Louisville, I will.
There you go.
Katie, I was wondering if you had a wordsmith recommendation of where to put in the support, because we have this long list of things to raise awareness on. And
Well, what about if it's just increasing awareness and support, or like or, you know?
Okay, that's where I put it. That's where I put it.
But yeah, and support of post-secondary financial aid opportunities, processes, timelines, and responsibilities.
Okay.
And I don't know, I would say instead of can be well prepared and well informed, I would almost say make well informed decisions, something like, because we want to prepare them obviously, but we want to make sure so that students and families can make well informed decisions about how to pay. Cut out some of your words there.
Thank you. Right. I'm also really interested in maybe connecting the unmet need research that Chris is doing. Because the Trellis Financial Wellness Survey, all of KCTCS colleges are administering that this fall. And so they will have by March kind of an amazing report for each college of the student basic needs or other financial wellness factors that their students are experiencing. I think it was like a low response rate, unfortunately, but it's a good start. But it's just kind of overall trying to increase our understanding of student financial wellness and the unmet need question and its prediction of, you know, degree completion or success is, I think, a key part of our being able to do a better job communicating and supporting students and families.
Building off of the action steps from the social capital belonging area, like one of the action steps we don't have with financial aid and literacy is the schools, you know, and I think that's a big part. I mean, I'm talking to a former neighbor who went to a school in Louisville and he's still like, and he's at Jefferson, but he didn't know about Evolve 502. And I'm just like, how did we miss that with him? Right. Like, you know, he's like the perfect candidate. And so working with that organization. So there's still, no matter how much we talk about these things, we miss some of the key populations. And so how do we get in the high schools, utilize the high schools? And again, like I want to do that with our, you know, I want to make sure our first year students are supported, but once, you know, a lot of the financial piece, right, is just like the preparedness piece about decisions before the first year.
Yeah.
And so like, you know, I think we have one without the counselors, right? Coordinate partnerships with counselors, but it's like coordinate those pieces, whether it's a guidance counselor or career or college counselor or career counselor, you know, different high schools use different names for those transition counselor roles if they have them. But I think that would be a big part that we'd want to think about with our action steps too.
So Katie, are you kind of suggesting that is incorporated, that the financial wellness piece or financial aid and literacy is incorporated into a social belonging?
Not necessarily, like not necessarily putting it with social capital, but just using how where our minds were with the social capital and belonging in terms of the P20 partnership pieces, like also making sure that we're thinking about how are we doing any kind of connection across those, you know, just like, again, counselors, high schools, making sure that, I mean, you know, we have to communicate with students and families, but we don't also then have the schools. So. And I don't know that I mean, I'm out of the college access world, so Tony, you can speak to this, but like, do we bring, back in the day in Louisville, we used to have a group, I don't remember what it's called, but we met in the Metro College space. But like, do we bring people around the state together? Like if I think about like our learning communities, our professional learning communities and communities of practice like this, to think about all of our grant funded organizations, our Lincoln Foundation, are all, you know, college access network almost in Kentucky. Does CPE have a way that we network beyond our Gear Up network and our other TRIO programs?
So it's a great question, and someone else may have a better answer. It's something I've been talking about for a few years, and I know that I think part of the Kentucky Advising Academy is in trying to create this network as well. So, but yeah, that would make a lot of sense, and I think that's something that would really help drive the conversation on how we help students after matriculation, is getting all those folks together.
And just to add to that really briefly, that's exactly what KAA is doing, is really trying to bring post-secondary folks together with secondary to have some common ground and common discussions. And really secondary folks really don't know a lot about the student supports in higher ed. They don't really know what TRIO is. Not everybody, but a lot of folks don't.
Right.
And the other resources that campuses use. And so that's one of the learning opportunities to say, you know, when you go, you're not alone. There are lots of resources, and here's some that are available. But right now there's not a lot of that shared because they're not even truly aware of what support services, wraparound services that campuses offer. So Katie, I appreciate that question a lot. That's something that really came to light last year when we had a cross group talking about successful transition and realizing that there's a lot of areas to grow and learning about each other's worlds and how we support students for sure.
And that organization work is open to people not attached to individual schools or to school districts. You know, like, again, I'm thinking like Cabbage Patch and Lincoln, like all these smaller organizations here that have, you know, that to be connected and do it, you know, would be very strategic and efficient for them to gain the information instead of seek it on there.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it's not exclusive. We just try to make it regional so folks have access.
Yeah.
But it is not exclusive to only school folks. Absolutely not. So, and that's why we even have like webinars and for folks to join and have those discussions, and then 2 face-to-face a year, just to be respectful of people being in their places of work and not being able to always leave. So.
And, you know, Dr. Ellis is completely right. That's why I always say, and I always ask questions to clarify things, because I'm from that K through 12 world, and trying to learn about the institution of higher education world has definitely been a little learning curve. So that's why I asked the question a while ago, and I'm not the only one, that's for sure.
Well, I think, the good news is that we talked a lot about action steps while we were talking about recommendations. So I think that this next bit, I would love to see your rankings, and then we might do a quick sidebar, small team meeting with me and Robert and Robin, and then put something out to you all so that you can review and make any recommendations for changes and then submit back. Our goal is just that by the end of December, we have submitted our official recommendations and action steps to the Commonwealth Education Continuum. Okay, now this might be easier on your computers as opposed to your phones. So if you want to go to menti.com and then put in our code here, it should still work, hopefully, and do your rankings. And I know that there are some that we discussed that aren't on here, so I don't think you have to fill in all 9. I think that if you just have a top 3, feel free to just leave it top 3. I think. I guess we'll just kind of see, won't we? This might be a little tricky. Okay. And just as a note, we had also talked about the Gateway course redesign, professional development for effective teaching practice and pedagogy. strengthening first year course success, to have strong embedded academic support services, best practices in placing students in first year courses for greatest chance of success. Okay. I feel like this poll is a little outdated. Okay, we'll go to the next one. Anybody want to have do we want to have any conversation on this? Is there anything that people feel strongly about that they want to either advocate for something that's lower or reemphasize why something is so important?
I'm sorry.
No, go.
Oh, thanks, Mark. Why, you might say what I want to say. Well, one, I think the 5th and 6th right now, the placement test ones and the 9th one, I think that's one thing personally. So I think we've split the votes there. And I think that there's, but I would say that I think we need to ease placement testing access. That's one of our biggest challenges for sure here. And then again, I put a note in the chat that the ones you read, I don't remember the 4th one, so I went with the first 3, but the ones you read, Lily, is where I would end, right? And part of that probably is looking at, I think the ones that are 1st through 3rd here for me are a little vague, and I don't know exactly what we were thinking there. And so they could be touching on that though, right? We could be looking at like statewide training in a post-pandemic world for gateway courses. We could be looking at, like we could dig in there. But I definitely think when we're looking about the first year experience, the pedagogy piece is really important to me.
Yes.
Katie was right. I will echo everything she said.
Okay, perfect. Well, we'll send this back out, and it'll probably say like the #1 language, and then underneath that it'll have like including gateway course redesign and pedagogy and like first year success pedagogy or student ready. I feel like maybe that was in the social capital one too. We got a lot of faculty development, it sounds like, both on the kind of pedagogical side and then also on just some of the other kind of new things to know, professional development around post-pandemic student trends. Okay. And then placement, I heard that loud and clear. Okay. All right, let's vote again. Good stuff. Has everyone voted? Still voting. Votes are coming in. Okay. So there were 2 that were on seek additional funds. So we could potentially lump those together for additional, funding strategies. The statewide professional learning community for faculty, absolutely a top priority. And I thought there were maybe two. There was the one on being student ready, and then there was another one on, social integration for students in the classroom. Those were right next to each other. And then this communication between high school and college advisors. And I think that is also echoed in the 7th one here with the Kentucky Advising Academy. So all good things that we can communicate through the Kentucky Advising Academy. Trying to see if there's anything else. Seek funding, professional learning community, coordinate partnerships with KAA. Oh, and then the only one that wasn't included on the roster originally was around integrate exploratory and career decision-making and first-year experience to build purpose and belonging. Would you guys rank that one like up there in the top 4 maybe, or top 4 or 5 if we were like lumping a few together? Do you think it would be up there?
Yeah, in my opinion, that one needs to rank really high.
Mine as well.
Okay. All right.
I have a quick question or comment. Summer Bridge, it rose to the top. Is there a general understanding of like statewide principles or expectations that would constitute what a Summer Bridge program is?
I missed that, Robert. I'm sorry.
So is there a set of principles or standards in Kentucky that would constitute what every Summer Bridge program is? Because I think there's I'd be curious, but I suspect there's some variation in terms of length and types of activities.
Right.
And I'm just curious how robust of a rubric might we have to analyze some of the Summer Bridge programs.
So I will tell you, Robert, what we have found when we did the Summer Bridge grant with the ESSER dollars is there's not a specific rubric because it depends on the purpose and who you're serving. If you have a specific student body that you're serving, or they all what your outcomes are, whether it's academic or social emotional belonging. And even if it is residential versus non. So we don't have a specific rubric. I will tell you, and Phyllis is on the call, we are doing a community of practice with the folks who are coordinating those Summer Bridge programs from the grants. And we're doing an external evaluation on impact and barriers and promising practices, because there's not a lot out there as far as a rubric per se. There's research out there on impact of Summer Bridge with Summer Melt and just the matriculation into post-secondary. And we initially started it because of COVID, because some students were coming in even as sophomores and had never been on campus and had not made a friend, didn't find their tribe yet. So we did that initially for freshmen and sophomores coming in because they hadn't even been in school at all for many of the students. And then we continued to hear the need for the struggles with academic preparedness, as you all have talked about today, and just the social emotional sense of feeling overwhelmed and knowing how to navigate a new campus, a new environment, and the stress of college, basically, if they had not been in their schools, and just all the changes. And so I have not seen one. I think it's a really good question. And when we were digging into the research around it to request those ESSER dollars, really there wasn't anything out there that we found standardized, just impact. Depending on the purpose of the Summer Bridge program. I don't know if that's helpful.
Oh yeah, that's very helpful because we know the potential. I'm just curious how the potential is distributed across the different variations. That's very helpful.
Okay, well, we have a couple minutes left of our meeting, so let's just go on. We'll do our final ranking. And in this one, I think a couple of just updates. We had really wanted to ensure that however we word this, it is inclusive of current college students so that we know that they still need help. And then we had another kind of recommendation around leveraging Kia, really kind of, that could be a sub bullet of communicating with students and families. And then I think kind of connected to the Trellis one, we had talked a little bit more about really engaging with the unmet need research as another way of understanding the full financial challenges our students might face. Okay, have we all voted? That was a little easier for me anyway. Okay.
In looking at that, could the fourth one be included in the first one?
Good idea. Yeah, that's a very specific thing to communicate about, but could certainly have time to degree implications and likelihood of success. Yeah, definitely. Okay. Any other thoughts on these?
I just want to reiterate the importance of understanding work-ready college scholarships for our families and students because it is so super confusing. And I think that may go a long way towards helping families understand, at least their financial well-being as far as getting their student through to whether it's, to that credential, whatever it may be.
Yep. And Amanda, I don't know what the next step is for once these action steps are recommended, are there additional teams that will be identified? But like, definitely we would want Kia and financial aid advisors and like a really focused group helping build out
Yes.
the work.
So if you want me to, I can just give a brief, like next steps, what happens.
Perfect.
Because I know it's right at the end and I so appreciate this conversation. So yeah, so next steps, recommendations will definitely be sent and we'll just clean that up and put it into one document. We also do give the organizations, a great example that you just gave with Kia, an opportunity to read the actions and recommendations to make sure that something isn't already going on that we just didn't know, which then to me gets back to a communication issue of like, if you already have it and nobody knows about it, then that needs to really be elevated in the communication and we would let you guys know that. So we do give the agencies an opportunity to go, actually, we're doing that, or this is something similar. So there's no surprises because this is not a gotcha. This is a let's work together and make this better. And so then what we do is then we will take these recommendations and proposed actions to the continuum and walk through those and talk about the conversations that were had and the recommendations, and the continuum then will even prioritize what they would like to see happen first. Like, this is really a top priority thing, or can we learn more about this, or can we ask the committee consider really pursuing this next, or what would your recommendation be? And that's where the action then begins. And so so that's what we will do. That process will take place over the next few weeks, and then our continuum meeting is on December 14th. So we will then be in touch with you guys afterwards, because we don't want you to go away. Like, you've made the recommendations and have the conversations, but we have you at this table for a reason, or on the Zoom for a reason. Is because your expertise and what you bring. And so we will probably come to you on approach, and if there's some immediate action things we can do, or if we need to pursue funding or any type of policy change, things like that, we will definitely do that as well. So, a lot around your communications campaign sometimes just takes coordination to figure out what that communication is and who is the audience, and bringing your resources together for us to help elevate that through various role groups that we have represented on the continuum. Specifically, I mean, we have students, parents, secondary, post-secondary workforce, you name it. And that's part of their role is to help elevate those things, help to disseminate the information. So we will be in touch, but that's the next steps to the process, is it really guides our next step into action. And so I greatly appreciate it.
Amanda, you said December 14th is your next continuum meeting. So when would you need our recommendations?
So I would assume you would put this into what you all did today to kind of clean this up by the date you had originally on your next step slide. I'm sorry.
Okay, like December 2nd is when
That would
we'll
be-
get out
Yes.
a pretty good draft to you all, but we'll need pretty quick turnaround for your
Yeah.
insights and feedback. And then we'll send the final version over to Amanda's shop.
Yes. Perfect. Perfect.
Okay.
Perfect. Perfect. But yes, that's the next steps.
Okay. Well, we're right at 3. Appreciate you all so much. This was a long meeting. Thank you so much for your engagement and all of the great discussion. And this may be our last meeting as we currently exist. So stay tuned for more information from Amanda on next steps. But appreciate y'all, and you'll get an email from me and Robert by December 2nd.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye,
you
everyone.
all.
Happy Thanksgiving.
You.